It's late afternoon on Monday, October 19th, 2010. I'm leaving work. I'm a little annoyed because a conference call that I've been on has run long, starting my commute late. And as I'm pulling out onto Broadway in downtown Tucson, I have to stop at a green light because I look left, there's a police car coming through the intersection against the red light, sirens going, lights flashing, and so I stop and I let him go through, and I pull out into the intersection behind this police car. And within a block, he has stopped his car and parked it at a 90-degree angle right in front of me in my lane on the road. So I have to pull around him to keep going, and I'm slowly pulling around him, and right as I pull up next to the police car, I look over and I see a man running around the front of the police car straight at me, and he's holding a gun and he's pointing it in my face. I jam my foot on the brake and I stare into his eyes, and they're gold, and they're terrified, and they're desperate. And I know that I am going to die. Without thinking, I throw my car into reverse and I back up across 3 lanes. It's a wide road. I back up across 3 lanes, watching as this man's running towards me with this gun still pointing right at my face. And then my wheels hit the curb on the other side of the street, and he stops coming towards me. He circles around and runs back to the police car. And by this time, the officer has gotten out of his car, and this man with the gun jumped into the police car, the driver's seat. The cop has left his keys in the car. And he gets in the car and drives off. And as I watch, the police officer drops to his knee and fires off 3 shots like that. And I find out later that Officer Wakeman has killed this man. Joseph Molina dies that night in the hospital. But in this moment, I'm sitting in my car, and like this, literally. And then I hear something to my left. I look out of my left window, and there's another policeman there, and young guy. I don't know if he's even out of high school, but he's kind of like, come on, lady, let's move along. We have to keep the place clear. Like I'm a spectator here or something. I don't know what he's thinking. He's not thinking. He doesn't even know what just happened. But he's not thinking. I know I'm not thinking. But I go to do what he tells me, and I look down, and by this time, in those few endless seconds that it's taken for this whole thing to happen, the light at the corner has changed, and there's 3 lanes of traffic coming straight at me. And I'm sitting there, and again, all I'm thinking at this point is, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And somehow I managed to pull out into the middle of all of those cars and join all of these cars full of people that just want to go home. And then my brain kicks into high gear, and I reach over and I grab this cell phone on the seat next to me, and I speed dial my boss, and I say, Craig, you can't go. Don't leave work. Tell everyone not to leave the office. There's a guy out there. He's got a gun, and it's not. Don't leave. And this man, who has been a big part of making my life miserable for the last 5 years, became an amazing human in that moment. He just said, "Are you okay? Where are you? Can I come get you? Michelle, I'll drive you home." And I burst into tears. I'm still driving. I just burst into tears. I just said, "No, Craig, I'm okay. I just want to go home." And so I hung up and I kept driving, and the first place I saw that I could stop was a Safeway about a mile down. I pulled into the parking lot of the Safeway and just sat for a minute, and as I was sitting there, I got an idea, and I went into the Safeway and I bought a 5th of Smirnoff vodka And I came back out to the parking lot, and sitting in that parking lot, I cracked that bottle open, drank it right out of the bottle in the brown paper bag in my car, good 3 or 4 swallows sitting right there. Now, that is not a good idea on any number of levels. For me, I'm a person who quit drinking when I was 19, because at that time in my life, it was quit or get locked up. I quit completely. So at this point in my life, I had turned my life around. And on the day that this event happened, I was by any measure at the top of my game. I was a senior executive at a billion-dollar corporation that I had helped build from a little mom-and-pop agency in Tucson to becoming publicly traded on NASDAQ. I was being flown all over the world, first class, staying in amazing hotels, speaking at conferences and talking to Wall Street investors and learning what EBITDA means and all of these things. And I had flexibility in my schedule so I could spend time with my son. I had it made. And yet on that day, when my response to a life-threatening situation was to do something that was ultimately self-destructive for me, that came as a result of not having the foundation that I had worked so hard to build, of having lost that foundation over the last number of years by being in a place in my life that I did not want to be. And so for me, picking up that bottle was just like finishing the job that this guy with the gun had started. And I figured that out pretty quickly. I knew it. And I was starting to get my act together and really start to deal with, okay, how did you get to that point where that's what you did? You need to start making some different decisions in your life. And was starting to get it together, and a couple months later, I was thrown back into that day when I was looking into the face of that man and the muzzle of that gun when I heard that Gabrielle Giffords and a number of her staff had been shot less than a mile from my house. That threw me back, right back into that day in my car. And a couple of blurry days later, I broke every single rule I had ever made about drinking, and I was taken away in an ambulance from the Barack Obama event that I had, the service when he came to town. I had taken my son to that event, and I was taken off in an ambulance right in front of my son, who had never seen me drink before. And when I woke up in the hospital the next morning, when I came to, really, I didn't have a lot of memory of the day before, but what I did remember was the look on my 10-year-old son's face as he saw me being put in this ambulance, and he was scared, and he was confused, and he was afraid his mom was going to die. And in that moment, I knew I was waking up to a life that I had created when I was asleep. And it was not just hurting me, it was hurting the person I love more than anyone in my world. So one of the main things I learned from that series of events in my life is that what happened to me is extreme and it's dramatic, and I would not wish it on anyone. And yet, something like that can happen to any one of us on any day. And it might be a phone call from a doctor with some unexpected test results, or it might be a loss of a job or a relationship, some unexpected loss, but it happens on a day that starts out like any other, a day when you're getting in your car and you just want to go home. And we have no control over when something like that happens. The only thing we have control over is what we choose to do in response. And what I chose to do in response to the awareness that came from those events is, within a year I had quit that job. I had left a long-term relationship that was a lot like the job, looked really great on the outside, but was pretty empty. I'd ended most of the relationships I had, friendships, they weren't really friendships at that time in my life. They were more contacts that I had to maintain. And pretty much everything externally I changed about my life. The only thing that mattered, though, was not the external, it was the internal script. It was my internal script with myself and with the world. Because what I believe is left unsaid way too often is the word no. What I believe is that we need to say no a lot more often than we do. As women, we are encouraged to say yes, to go for it, to jump in there. You got this, girl. Lean in. You can do it. Take it on, right? We're encouraged. And like Carla said, ask a busy woman. It's going to get done, right? And for me, it was by saying yes to a lot of things that were asked of me that got me to that point in my life. A lot of promotions, a lot of movement in my career. But for me, that meant I created a life that was not my own. And every time I say yes without really thinking about it, by default, I'm saying no to something else. And most often, I'm saying no to what I want, in favor of saying yes to all of the other things that are asked of me. So for me, I say yes. When I say yes, it's not just a yes, it's a hell yes. It's a hell yes. So today, I say hell yes to my life.